back for part 4 of our Unlikely Heroes series. Today's one of my favorite because we're going to talk about Joseph. This is probably one of my most relatable characters of those listed in this Hall of Faith, this great Hall of Faith. So this inclusion of Joseph into this Hall of Faith, it says a lot about his unwavering trust in God, even amidst life's trials and tribulations. And we're going to talk about a lot of this today. So let's get ready and let's jump right on into why Joseph was included into this Hall of Faith. Before we get into some meat and potatoes, I want to talk about his background. Let's lay the foundation here. Who is Joseph? Well, Joseph is the son of Jacob and Rachel. Jacob had 2 wives, Leah and Rachel. You can go back and study that, but basically he wanted to have Rachel, but he ended up having to marry Leah. Because he has 2 wives, Rachel couldn't bear children. Leah could. She has many children. Finally, Rachel gives Jacob a child, and the first one is Joseph. He also ends up having a younger brother through Rachel, which is Benjamin. Now, because he favors Rachel, Jacob shows a lot of favor to Joseph. This is symbolized through a coat of many colors, the famous coat of many colors most of you, if not all of you, have heard of. This coat is such an outrageous gift that the rest of the siblings, they kind of have some animosity and jealousy. This just cements the favor that Joseph had from Jacob, and so keep that in mind as we move forward. Let's break Joseph's life now down into 3 parts. The first is a life transformed by dreams. Go to Genesis 37 and you can read a lot about this. We're going to talk about a couple of dreams here, the first of which you can find in Genesis 37 verses 5 through 8. In that first dream, Joseph saw himself and his brothers biting sheaves of grain in a field. Suddenly his sheaf rose, stood upright, while his brothers' sheaves gathered around and they bowed down to his. This dream hints at his future leadership and authority over his brothers. Then there's a second dream. Continues on in verse 9 through 11. This dream involves the sun, which can be interpreted as his father Jacob, the moon, his mother Rachel, and his 11 stars, his brothers, bowing down to him. When he shared this dream with his family, though, even his father Jacob questions its significance, yet he kept the dream in mind. This dream would actually foreshadow Joseph's future rise to power not only over his brothers, but also over his entire family. The dreams were met with jealousy and resentment from his brothers, and they despised him even more because of this. They saw it as arrogance and favoritism from their father. Now, the rest of Genesis 37, it tells the story of what happens to Joseph after these dreams. See, he goes to Dothan to meet his brothers who were out in the fields, and when they saw him from a distance, they conspired against him, planning to kill him and throw him into a pit. And the oldest brother, Reuben, he intervenes and suggests throwing Joseph into a pit without harming him, and will rescue him later. However, while Reuben was gone, stepped away for a little bit, maybe to go to the bathroom, who knows, the other brother saw a group of Ishmaelite traders passing by and decided to sell Joseph to them instead. The brothers approached the traders and negotiated a price for Joseph. Well, they sold him for the low price of 20 shekels of silver, a sum which often was paid for a slave back then. Joseph was then taken away from his family, his homeland, and he was sent to Egypt. He would later actually be sold from the tribe over to Potiphar. Well, prior to selling Joseph, the brothers ripped the coat off of him, that coat of many colors. They dipped it in animal blood before going home. They presented it to their father Jacob to make Jacob believe that Joseph had been killed by a wild animal. This coat was given to Joseph by Jacob as, again, that symbol of favor and distinction, and it now had been used as a tool of deception. And it just further intensified Jacob's grief. Picture Joseph at this time. He's a 17-year-old boy, or from a father's perspective, picture your son, your 17-year-old son being gone. You're being led to believe that he's dead. Even if he hadn't been killed, he'd been told the truth, his son had been sold into slavery and he's now in a foreign land. Either way, both are not good, right? And it grieves a father deeply, just like it did Jacob. Now, before we continue on with Joseph, let me time out here. Let me do my little Saved by the Bell, Zach Morris time out. Think back to last week when we talked about Abraham. We talked about Abraham being married to Hagar because he wanted to be able to have a son. He wasn't happening fast enough, so he rushed it. In Genesis 16:12, we'll remember that we read that Ishmael will be a wild man of a donkey, and his hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he'll live in hostility towards all his brothers. Well, this passage seems to suggest that Ishmael would have a contentious relationship with others. They would have conflicts with him. He'd have conflicts with them, and it portrays just a constant state of hostility and strife. We're not sure if it's all going to be directed towards Isaac or not, but in this verse, as it pertains to this story, getting to Joseph, he was sold to who? An Ishmaelite tribe. A descendant of Isaac just got sold into slavery to an Ishmaelite tribe. Interesting story. And the thread just keeps getting weaved. Now, the application we can learn from Joseph, this part of Joseph's story, it teaches us to hold on to the importance of holding on to dreams and promises that God gives us, even when circumstances seem to contradict them. It reminds us that God's plan for our lives are greater than we can comprehend, and that God's faithfulness, will see us through every trial and adversity. Just as Joseph's dreams were fulfilled, we can trust that God's plan for us will come to fruition in His perfect timing. Not ours, but His. Now, Joseph's was also a life of integrity. His life serves as a powerful example of unwavering integrity in the face of temptation and adversity. Even when confronted with difficult situations, he remained steadfast in his commitment to honor God and maintain his moral principles. There's no better example of that than when he was sold into custody to Potiphar, the Egyptian official. He was set up in his household. He was faced with adversity there. Now, at first, it all sounded good. Even after being sold into slavery, Joseph finds himself in this household where Potiphar recognizes his character and integrity were very, very evident. And so he places him in a position of authority, making him the overseer of his household and entrusting him with various responsibilities. See, the Lord had blessed Joseph's work in Potiphar's house, and everything under Joseph's care prospered. Potiphar recognized the divine favor on Joseph, and that's why he entrusted him with increasing responsibility. Look, this guy's being blessed. Everything, it's like the Midas touch. Everything turns to gold. Why wouldn't you put him there? However, as we often see, when things are going good, especially when things are going good, temptation's often right around the corner. It was no different with Joseph. Potiphar's wife began to seduce Joseph. He resisted. She seduced him more. He resisted more. She seduced him again, and eventually got to the point where he made it abundantly clear that he would not do it. Well, she got upset and accused him of sexual assault, and Potiphar, of course, gets ready to pull him in and throw him in jail. During the phase of accusation, though, you can tell where Joseph's mind was in Genesis 39:9 when we read, "How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God?" Joseph's integrity and fear of God guided his actions, allowing him to resist temptation and remain faithful to his beliefs. However, through this phase of accusation we see, the world sometimes is just unjust, and Joseph found himself imprisoned. There he joined other prisoners who had also fallen out of favor with Pharaoh, or they were accused of various crimes. These included the Pharaoh's chief cupbearer and his chief baker, who were also imprisoned for offenses against Pharaoh. We don't know the specifics, we just know they were there. One night, both the cupbearer and the baker had dreams that troubled them. When Joseph saw them, he noticed their distress and he asked them about their dreams. Well, the cupbearer and the baker shared their dreams, and the cupbearer went first. He dreamed of a vine with 3 branches that budded, they bloomed, and they produced grapes. And he squeezed the grapes into Pharaoh's cup. Joseph interpreted the dream as a favorable sign, indicating that the cupbearer would be restored to his position in 3 days. The baker, "Hey man, that's good news. You got good news. Here's my dream." So he shares it with Joseph. He says in his dream, he goes, "I had 3 baskets of bread on my head, and the birds were eating from these baskets." Joseph interpreted this dream as a negative sign. The baker probably didn't want to hear this, but his dream was foretelling that the baker would be executed in 3 days. Maybe he shouldn't have shared his dream. Joseph's interpretations proved to be accurate. On the 3rd day, which happened to be the Pharaoh's birthday, he held a feast. He restored the cupbearer to his position, his former position, just as Joseph had predicted. However, he executed the baker, just as Joseph had predicted. Before the cupbearer's release, Joseph asked him to remember him and speak to Pharaoh on his behalf, seeking his release from prison. Joseph had hoped the cupbearer would actually go up, put in a good word. Pharaoh would come down, give him his freedom. However, apparently the cupbearer had a memory lapse and forgot all about Joseph's request. He didn't mention Joseph to the Pharaoh at all, leaving Joseph in prison for an extended period of time, approximately 2 years or so. Well, even though the cupbearer did not honor his word, God's word never failed. God's faithfulness to Joseph never wavered, even while Joseph remained inside the prison walls. Just as he had done in Potiphar's house, Joseph's character and ability stood out even in prison. Stood out so much that the warden recognized Joseph's qualities and put him in charge of overseeing other prisoners, indicating Joseph's continued demonstration of leadership. An inmate over an inmate. So he was like a trustee. Pharaoh, the ruler of Egypt, had a pair of troubling dreams that deeply troubled him. So times passed, here we go, we're starting to have this. None of his wise men and magicians could interpret the dreams to his satisfaction. Caused a lot of stress in Pharaoh's life. And it's been 2 years, like I said, after Joseph interpreted the dreams, that the cupbearer all of a sudden, ding, light bulb goes off. Hey, I know a guy. You might want to go back and talk to him. His name is Joseph. Well, Joseph's called up to the Pharaoh. He interprets the dream, and he resolved to share this information with Pharaoh. Well, here's the story of what happens there. Pharaoh recounts his dream to Joseph. The dreams involve 7 fat cows being devoured by 7 thin cows. That's fun. Also includes 7 plump ears of grain being consumed by 7 withered ears of grain. Well, Joseph, being guided by God's wisdom, interprets the dream as a message from God. He explains that the dreams represent 7 years of abundant harvest, followed by 7 years of severe famine. Alongside interpreting the dreams, Joseph also provided Pharaoh with a plan to manage the coming years of abundance and famine. He advises Pharaoh to appoint a wise and discerning man to oversee the collection and storage of food during this prosperous time of 7 years. That would ensure you would have enough provisions to sustain Egypt during the famine. Pharaoh was greatly impressed by Joseph's wisdom and discernment. In recognizing that the Spirit of God was with Joseph, it amazes me at that point. It amazes me that he recognizes that the Spirit of God is with Joseph. Now, he had already seen it before, but now I guess he just got reminded. But anyway, Pharaoh elevates him to a position of great authority and power. He made Joseph second in command of one of the largest, most powerful nations in the world at that time. Joseph is given authority over Pharaoh's house and all the people of Egypt. With this promotion, Joseph's dreams from his youth, where his brothers and parents bowed down to him, remember that one, the sun, the moon, and the stars, began to be fulfilled. God's plan for Joseph's life was being realized, and he was positioned to save Egypt and his own family from the upcoming famine. Joseph's time in Potiphar's house and prison showcases his unwavering faithfulness, resilience, and the ways in which he consistently demonstrated his leadership and administrative skills. Despite the injustices he faced, it was his character and his trust in God that remained steadfast and ultimately led to him being fulfilled to step into his divine destiny. His release from prison was a divine appointment orchestrated by God to place him in a position where he could fulfill his actual purpose. Through his interpretation of Pharaoh's dreams and his subsequent rise to power, Joseph's journey takes a significant turn, leading him to play a critical role in the preservation of many lives and the fulfillment of God's plan for his family in the nation of Egypt. So what's the lesson we can get out of this? His life of integrity should challenge us to consider our own actions and choices. In a world where we look around and we just see moral compromise after moral compromise after moral compromise, where we see shortcuts taken all the time, those are all seen as acceptable these days. Well, Joseph's example reminds us of the importance of maintaining our moral compass even when faced with difficult circumstances. Integrity involves aligning our actions and decisions with moral principles and values, regardless of the potential consequences. It means living consistently according to the standards set by God. Doesn't matter what man says, our standards should be set by God, even when it may be easier to compromise or give in to temptation. Joseph's unwavering commitment to integrity shows us that such a stance is not only possible, but it's rewarded by God in due time. In our own lives, we may face situations where compromising our integrity may seem tempting or even advantageous. However, Joseph's example reminds us that true success and true fulfillment come from living a life of integrity. When we choose to honor God and uphold our moral principles, we not only maintain our character, but also inspire others, and we demonstrate our unwavering faith. Now let's get to part 3 of Joseph's life. Let's look at the point number 3. His life was also a life shaped by forgiveness. Joseph's life is a remarkable testament to the power and transformative nature of forgiveness. Despite enduring immense betrayal, rejection, and injustice, Joseph chose to extend forgiveness to those who had wronged him, demonstrating a deep understanding of God's sovereignty and the ability to even see beyond personal pain. After being sold into slavery by his jealous brothers and enduring years of separation from his family, Joseph had an opportunity for reconciliation when his brothers traveled to Egypt seeking for food during that severe famine. When Joseph's brothers arrived in Egypt, they didn't even know who he was. They didn't recognize him. His appearance was different, and just time had passed. Again, think back when you're 17, how much you changed in a matter of 5 to 10 years. However, Joseph immediately recognized them. He used various tests, such as accusing them of being spies and demanding the presence of Benjamin, their youngest brother, to assess their character and sincerity. After witnessing his brother's remorse and witnessing their genuine concern for their father and youngest brother, Joseph could no longer contain his emotions. Overwhelmed with love and compassion, he chose to disclose his true identity to them. This revelation marked a pivotal moment in the relationship, as now the truth would come out. The truth has come to light. It always does. And it did here. In the depth of their shared history, it all became evident. Instead of harboring resentment and seeking revenge, Joseph chose to extend forgiveness to his brothers. He recognized that God had a greater purpose in their actions, emphasizing that their betrayal was part of God's plan to save lives and ultimately reconcile their family. Joseph's forgiveness opened the door for reconciliation, laying the foundation for healing and restoration. The union between Joseph and his brothers was fulfilled with intense emotion. They wept together, embracing one another, and Joseph assured them of his love and forgiveness. The release of pent-up emotions and the genuine display of affection signified the profound impact of forgiveness and the weight of restoration taking place within their hearts. Joseph ensured the well-being of his family during the remaining years of the famine, made sure they were taken care of. He welcomed them to Egypt, provided them with land in the region of Goshen, and ensured that they had an abundance of provisions. The family was reunited, living together in Egypt under Joseph's protection and care. Just think about that. The boy they sold off into slavery is now the resource which provides for their provision. Excuse me. This reunion marked a significant turning point as they were once again united as a family. The reconciliation in Joseph's family symbolizes a profound healing and restoration of their relationships. It represents a transformative journey from brokenness to wholeness, where forgiveness and grace played a central role. The wounds caused by jealousy, deceit, and betrayal were gradually healed through the power of forgiveness and the work of God's redemptive plan. It demonstrates the importance of forgiveness, the power of love, and the possibility of transformation even in the most challenging of circumstances. Through Joseph's story, we actually see the incredible outcomes that can emerge when individuals choose reconciliation and allow God's grace to work in their lives. When Joseph revealed himself to his brothers, he assured them that he harbored no ill will, and we can read this in Genesis 45, verse 4 through 5. I want you to point this out. His words are, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. I'm reminding you, I am identifying you who I am. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. Joseph recognized that God had used the evil intentions of his brothers as part of God's divine plan to save many lives, including their own. Joseph's forgiveness extended beyond mere words. It was through showing embrace. It was through the weeping, showing them compassion, genuine compassion. He offered them a place of honor and provision in Egypt, ensuring their well-being during that famine time. It wasn't just words, it was actions. Joseph's forgiveness is seen in his response to his father, Jacob's death, and it's an amazing scene. See, they thought that whenever their father was about to die, that he didn't really forgive us. He's just harboring it and waiting until Jacob dies. But in Genesis 50, verse 20, you see, he says, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Again, Joseph shows and displays that he fully understood that God's providential hand was at work here throughout his life, using the evil acts of others that had happened in his life, the selling into slavery, Potiphar's wife's accusation, those things. It was all done to prepare him for this time, this moment that he was there to save lives. Now pay attention to this. He recognized that forgiveness was not only about releasing personal pain, but also about acknowledging God's sovereignty and redemptive power. Joseph's forgiveness allowed for the healing and restoration of his family, and it paved the way for the fulfillment of God's promises in our own lives. Joseph's example challenges us to examine our attitudes towards forgiveness, to confront the hurts and betrayals we may have experienced, and choose a path of grace and reconciliation. Forgiveness doesn't negate the pain or condone the wrongs committed against us. Rather, it releases us from the bondage of bitterness, and it enables us to experience true freedom and peace. Joseph's life, shaped by forgiveness, teaches us that God can transform the most difficult circumstances into opportunities for redemption and restoration. Just as Joseph embraced forgiveness, we should also choose to extend grace to those who have wronged us. By doing so, we reflect the heart of Christ and invite his transformative power into our relationships and our lives. So with all of this, we see why Joseph was included in Hebrews 11. It's his unwavering trust in God's providence that leads him to this list. Joseph's life showcases the transformative power of faith in the face of adversity, the importance of living with integrity, and the radical nature of forgiveness. May we see and use and learn from the example of Joseph the fulfillment of God's promises, that we may live a life of integrity and we choose to forgive those who have hurt us. Let us be encouraged to emulate his faith in our lives. And in doing so, we will honor God and become true heroes of faith in our generation. We don't have to hold on to all of the things of the past, guys. We can allow God to transform us and be used as wonderful vessels. Let me pray. Father, we just come to you now, thanking you, Lord, for the example of Joseph. So much happened in his life where he could have gave up. He could have just given up. Woe is me. My circumstances are just too much to bear. But he remained with his eye on you through the time of being sold into slavery, into a foreign land, into Potiphar's house, being falsely accused, being imprisoned. All of those things are enough to weigh a man down and be excuses to give up. Way better excuses to give up than we come up with today in our time. So what's our excuse? Father, may we learn from Joseph's life that persistence and the dedication in our faith to you, Lord, our faith in who you are, our faith in your commitment, your promises. As long as we hold to those, you are in control of all things in this world. And you're no different then than you are today. And you open doors and you use what was meant for evil and you turn them in for good in his story. And Joseph recognized that. Let us hold on to that same thing, that sometimes when things like that happen in our lives, let us make sure that we hold fast to the faith in you, that you are good, you love us, you want the best for us, and that as long as we continue to move towards you, Lord, and in our relationship status, Father, we're going to stumble. Yes, we're going to stumble. But Father, it is your goodness and your faithfulness and your love for us that surpasses all of our mistakes. Give us the heart, the desire, the drive, the fire to keep pushing forward each and every day. To wake up remembering our blessings, even if it's only one blessing that we can see, let us acknowledge it. And then through that, we can see more and more and more. And our eyes are trained to go to you. So, Father, I just thank you for this day. I thank you for each and every family represented here today. And, Father, I don't care when this video is being seen. Let it touch lives. Let it touch lives. May your will be done. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, we're going to continue with worship now. Be sure, if you have any questions, our host team is standing by. We're welcoming. We want you to be available, be able to share whatever you want. It's a free space, a safe space for you to be able to talk without any judgment. Look, guys, we're all a community that has been impacted by similar things, and there's nothing that you can tell us that we haven't come across or been a part of. So I promise you, we'll see no judgment. We are here for you. We do this. We're not paid to do this. We do this all because we love you and we want the best for you. So if there's anything, while the music starts to play in a second, chat with us. If you don't know Jesus, if you have not had a relationship with him yet, or you need your relationship restored, now's the time to do it. Our host team members are standing by. Connect with them. But make sure you come back no matter what next week, part 5, as we continue our series on Likely Heroes. God bless you. Talk to you soon.